Welcome to the What is Stoicism podcast.
The Stoics knew how to decatastrophize. Faced with situations that most people would immediately label as disastrous, the Stoics trained themselves to see events plainly, without emotional exaggeration or the distortions of fear. This ability to strip an event down to its bare reality made it easier to process mentally and soothe the anxiety that we often impose on ourselves by interpreting things as worse than they are. There were many ways in which the Stoics took inspiration from Socrates, and this practice may have been one of them. There can be no greater example of decatastrophizing than Socrates facing the threat of imminent death after being sentenced to drink hemlock by an Athenian court. What could be more difficult to reinterpret calmly than certain, unavoidable death? Yet Socrates, addressing his worried friends after his fate had been sealed, offered them hope by presenting two possible scenarios and showing that neither was worth fearing. Either death is a state of nothingness and utter unconsciousness, he told them, or, as men say, there is a change and migration of the soul from this world to another. If death was nothingness, a dreamless sleep, then it was, he argued, an unspeakable gain. Who among us has enjoyed many days as peaceful and pleasant as our most restful nights? And if death was instead a journey to another place, where all who have died now abide, then what greater good could there be than meeting them? By refusing despair and reducing his situation to its philosophical core, Socrates examined his plight with remarkable calm. He declined to be terrified by what Epictetus would later call the mask of death. Turn it and examine it, Epictetus advised his students. See, it does not bite. Socrates was already doing this centuries earlier. He questioned the meaning of his fate, rather than being swept away by it. And we can use the same technique ourselves, even though the situations we face are almost always far less dramatic than a death sentence. Practicing decatastrophizing regularly prepares us for when we truly need it. In Socrates' own phrasing, let the voice of the charmer be applied daily until you have charmed away the fear. Repetition strengthens perception. This principle aligns naturally with one of Seneca's most famous insights from his 13th letter to Lucilius. There are more things, Lucilius, likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. With characteristic clarity, Seneca went straight to the heart of our tendency to worry about things that may never occur. Much of our suffering comes not from the world itself, but from the fearful stories we tell about what might happen. Seneca therefore advised his friend not to be unhappy before the crisis arrives. The dangers we picture as looming may never materialize, and at the moment we fear them, they certainly have not yet come. Extending the legal metaphor, Seneca said such worries may be postponed for the present because the subject is under discussion and the case is still in court. The verdict has not yet been reached. The modern writer Young Pueblo captures this same idea, though in different language. He attributes much of our anxiety to attachment. Attachment, the Stoics would note, to things outside our control, and he emphasizes how imagination fuels our distress. Quote, stress and anxiety are the children of attachment. They are both a form of craving that take us away from the present and into areas of imagination that steal away our peace. In another passage, young Pueblo offers a solution that the Stoics would wholeheartedly approve of. Quote, reclaiming your power is noticing when a story based on assumptions is making your mind tense and intentionally bringing yourself back to the present moment as a way to cut the delusion. End quote. Here we find the same call to decatastrophize, not by denying the possibility of misfortune, but by refusing to layer unnecessary fear, fantasy, and assumption on top of reality. The Stoic aim is not blind optimism, but clarity. Minimizing mental suffering is largely about stopping the imagination from wandering too far from what is actually happening. It's about grounding ourselves in the present rather than rushing out to meet fears that are still hypothetical. It's about noticing when assumptions or attachments are creating emotional disturbances over nothing. It's about reclaiming our power. And because this is not always easy, the Stoics emphasize practice. Repetition builds resilience. That's why they return to these ideas repeatedly. Why Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself in his journal. Why Epictetus drilled his students daily. While Seneca told Lucilius the same lessons in letter after letter. Transformation comes not from hearing a principle once, but from steeping the mind in it, often enough that it becomes second nature. Socrates understood this, the Stoics understood it, and we can understand it too. That fear dissolves when examined, that imagined suffering is optional, and that the mind becomes stronger each time it refuses to be carried away by the stories it invents.